Hey, normally you watch me create these shorts and I talk about marketing. Today, it's not going to be about marketing. It's going to be a lot more technical. I'll be talking about Docker and setting up backups of your website files to Google Drive. So if that's not your cup of tea, feel free to skip this one. But if you're technical, if you're a coder, if you're a software engineer, if you're a DevOps person, if you are a technical SaaS founder, then this one might be useful for you. So when I had my PR business, we used cPanel, and what was nice with cPanel was they made daily backups of everything. And at the time, I actually had a server in I think it was Atlanta, Georgia. No, sorry, it wasn't Atlanta. It was I think it was Chicago. But anyways, it was one of those like middle of the country areas, and I did some research as far as the data centers around there, which ones were least to get affected by weather conditions in case there's a massive earthquake here. And this is before I figured out how to automatically back up to Google Drive. That was the backup system that we had. And also it was so big, like backing up to Google Drive wasn't really an option at that time. Fast forward now, I've been working on my on RyanHoang.io, and I want to set up nightly backups on it. And after I closed my business, I started all the things that I wanted to learn. I started learning these things and acquiring new skills. And amongst those skills, it was Docker, and also moving away from the cPanel ecosystem. I had to figure out how to use to do nightly backups, and the way that I figured out how was using this thing called rclone. Now I actually have all the commands and how to set this up. If you go to code.ryanhuang.io, search for rclone, and then you'll be able to find those tutorials. But anyways, so with rclone, how it works is you set up on your Linux box, and then you can connect it to like a Google Drive account. You can connect it to an FTP or SCP, and there's like 30 different things that you can connect to. It's very powerful, and then from there you would write like a shell script to zip everything up using zip or tar.gz, and then you would then after you zip over those folders, you would then transport it. Now with the file system, it's pretty straightforward, but when it comes to the database, there were additional things that we had to do. We had to export into a .sql file, .sql file, and then compress that and then transport it. So it was outside of that workflow, and um, to restore it, it was a whole like process because at the time I didn't know how to use Docker, so restoring it was really just restoring it to another server because I couldn't figure out how to um, I mean, I could get like PHP and MySQL writing locally, but to match the exact things, because we were using a lot of different like, Apache modules and I think PHP extensions that, I mean, it's a lot easier to just like, restore it onto another server than it was to restore it locally because on another server it's Linux based and installing the same tools. It's a lot easier than me trying to figure out how to do that on Mac or Windows. But that was the process. But now, since I'm using Docker, what's really cool is it doesn't matter if I'm on a Mac or a Windows. I can like restore and run those things. Those and with the database, what's interesting is well, you can restore the database through by importing basically an .sql file when you restore the Docker container. And that's actually the recommended. What they don't recommend is to just zip up the data directory of the database while the container is running, because it could lead to data corruption and data integrity errors and data corruption. But I wanted to see for myself, and I wanted to run my own experiment and see what would happen. Because here's the thing: what they recommend is for you to export it to a .sql file, and then you would compress that, and then transport it over to your backup storage. But guess what? Those break as well. I have no idea how many times I've downloaded a backup file and it was just corrupt. And fortunately, like there were like it would back up with cPanel. It will make nightly backups, but then like it will delete the ones before. So at any given time, it'll keep like I think like a few weeks, and then each I think it was Sunday or Monday each week, it will create one copy, and that will be held on for like 3 months. Now like those are kind of just didn't really want to pay for that, so those backups were are gone. But when you're actually running the business, I mean, you never know. Sometimes like you need to go back to things, but at this time, what I'm doing using it for is for RyanHuang.io, And what I found that was interesting was if you can actually just compress the actual like directory with the database storage. In Docker, you would set the storage of your MySQL or Postgres database, and you can actually just compress that folder, and then you can restore it. But here's a catch. I found that if you are using Pascal case for your tables, it will lead to an error. If you're using, I'm using MariaDB, but I imagine it's similar if you're using MySQL, just they're kind of interchangeable. But it would give you, it gave me this like database engine error saying that it couldn't like locate it, and then it was I saw the table, but then when I went to I couldn't get into the actual table itself. But what was weird was all the ones that were lowercase or lowercase with underscores, those worked just fine. None of the data were missing or anything, and these were containers that were actively running. Now I haven't tested if there were like a lot of concurrent users. Maybe that might be a problem. But the fact that I can, so I'm actually going through this like really painstaking task of like renaming the tables and having Next.js, NextAuth, and DirectUs and CMS all like are using the scale case, which is like the capital first letter, no spaces. Like so, if it's let's say user profiles, the U and the P would be capitalized, or at least I think that's what Pascal case is. I think sometimes I get Pascal case and Camel case confused. I think Camel case is let's say user profile, the U in user will be lowercase, and then the P in profile will be capitalized. But I oftentimes get that like mixed up. I have not tested out with Camel case, but with Pascal case for the database tables, yeah, those do all came back like just broken and would not restore. But once I renamed them to lowercase with underscores, then it worked just fine, which is beautiful because that means I can just literally download a copy from Google Drive and then unzip it and then run Docker compose upd, and then there you go. There's the database, and then I can just change the path in the next in the app, and then restore the app, and then everything is running locally, which is I think pretty miraculous. If you're watching this and you're not and if you're like a coder, a web developer, or software engineer, and you have not tried Docker, it's very magical. I mean, you can like restore and run WordPress websites without any issues locally. And I think that's the coolest thing because before Docker, I mean, to could run a WordPress website locally or some PHP app, but as soon as it requires very specific PHP extensions or Apache modules, then well, it just becomes a really tough uphill battle that I would prefer to just to spin up another like server and do the staging or development on the server instead. So with Docker, it's really cool, and that's my tip. If you are trying to use rclone, this tutorial is free on my website. So code.ryanhuang.io, search for rclone or backups, and you should be able to find the steps for it. Give Docker a try. Docker is probably the one of the few life-changing things that I have learned within the scope of building websites and all of that good stuff. And also learning React and Next.js. Those are, I would say, two big game changers for me. Just to be able to use some of the, I mean, it's just such a much a far superior set of tooling than what I was used to, which was this old school. Basically, it was a modified LAMP stack that I was working with, and no Docker. I was using virtual machines. I still use virtual machines, but now I'm installing Docker containers on top of the virtual machines. So that's my setup right now. If you like this kind of video format, I'm not sure if hopefully it gets hopefully it's well received, and if it is, leave me comments, leave me feedback. I love feedback. Like, follow, subscribe to my stuff. The rest of my social media is on my website, ryanhuang.io, so you can check that out. I also have a ton of just free resources on there. A couple master classes that are free, a bunch of like SEO marketing tools that are free. I also have a community there, a Discord and Meetup community, so you can check that as well. Thank you for taking time to watch